It all starts with getting the best game idea you've ever had, and without wasting any time, you get to work on it. You start with enthusiasm and optimism, but over time, that enthusiasm slowly turns into doubt, which turns to dread, which turns to sloth, and before you know it, you've tossed that project into the abyss with all the other unfinished messes, never to be seen again. Congratulations! You've just spent time, effort, energy, thought, money, and willpower. Here's your reward. Little to no experience, no marketing skills, decreased confidence, and a blurry idea of what your time is actually worth. Does this sound like you? Have you started more projects than you've actually finished? I know I have. We've got to fix this problem. The most common reason I see for creative people shelving projects is because they get a new idea. They're not giving up on their passion entirely, right? Just the current goal. Who wants to work on that old rinky-dink project anyways, with all its flaws and blemishes, when you've got this new idea that's way better, and totally won't end up like all your other dead projects? What's the harm in starting fresh? I mean, you're still just learning, right? Well, the problem is, you will always be learning. And the best way to learn is to actually see your project through to the end. Imagine an architect who has only ever built foundations for houses. The architect might think that they've gotten good practice in, but in reality, they don't actually know for sure if any of those foundations even work. When I start a project, I like to think of the old parable about a pottery class where the professor divided the students into two equal groups. The quantity group, as I'll call it, had to make new pots every week to pass the class, whereas the perfection group could spend the entire semester perfecting one single pot. By the end of the semester, each student from group quantity had made 50 works, and each student from the perfection group had spent the whole semester on just one. Now tell me, which pot do you think was better? The 50th of a student in group quantity, or the single pot from a student in group perfection? Shockingly enough, the quantity group's final pots were unanimously and starkly superior to every single pot in the perfection group. While the perfection group theorized about perfection, the quantity group got to work and failed over and over again until they finally got it right. If you keep getting new ideas that are distracting you from your goal, put those ideas on the shelf instead of your current goal. You can get to them later. If you're just starting to learn to paint, for example, don't try to make your masterpiece. Just spend a couple hours on a landscape, frame it in all its imperfect glory, and move on to the next one. Don't let your big ideas distract you. Once you start actually putting pen to paper, you'll have a lot better ideas than those anyways. Believe me. If you're not finishing your project, then you're probably starting too big. You're like the architect who tries to build a mansion before they've ever even built a simple hut. If you've never published a game, listen especially closely to what I am about to say. When setting the goal for your work, you need to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you are capable of building it. This will give you the confidence and enthusiasm required to see it through. There is a psychological phenomenon called flow in which someone enjoys the work they're doing rather than being frustrated or bored by it. The trick is for the goal you're working towards to be just slightly above your level of competency. Too easy and you become bored. Too difficult and it's discouraging and frustrating. Game designers understand this concept well, since this is the state where video games thrive. In almost any game that's fun, it's a little difficult, but you know you can beat it if you keep playing. This is how our creative work should feel. As philosopher Alan Watts once said, the key is to be completely engaged in what you are doing, and instead of calling it work, realize that it is play. My personal favorite way to stay in flow is to break down a project into smaller bite-sized tasks with time constraints. Just like levels in a video game, I don't sit down with the goal of continue working on this project, since that's super vague and will make it really easy to get sidetracked. Instead, my goal is something like, spend 1 hour fixing these 3 bugs. Just one level at a time. I'll have a piece of paper filled with goals like this and the time I expect them to take. I'll even set a timer on my phone to keep myself accountable while I'm working. It's a nice little challenge and a great way to gauge your efficiency. Believe me, it is really rewarding when you notice that something which used to take you an hour now only takes you 45 minutes. Plus, it's nice to have a list in front of you with all the accomplishments you've had while working on the project. If you're just starting out and you don't know how long certain tasks are supposed to take, that's fine. Just feel free to track your time without a specific time constraint to just get an idea for how long things would take. If you feel like you never have the energy to work on your goals, then this is the tip for you. Understanding the flow state can make work exciting and playful, rather than something you have to dread doing. There's no shame in starting with small goals either. As your competency grows, so does the level of challenge you're able to summit. Eventually, if you're setting your goals right, making your masterpiece will feel just as challenging as making your first 5-minute game.
I want to be one of the greats.
And I would stop you from doing that.
Yeah.
What if you know what you want to do, you know you can do it, you know how to do it, and you really want to do it, but you just don't have the time? There's just no opportunities throughout the day to sit down and get the work done. This advice is going to be pretty abstract, so bear with me. You have more time than you think. Now, you may hear someone say, like, there's 24 hours in a day, we've got all the same amount of time, it's all about the grind set, bro. That's not really true. It's a pretty narrow-minded thing to say. I mean, everyone has their own responsibilities that they have to do throughout the day, and I'm not trying to make that argument at all. That's not a great argument. What I am saying is that sometimes there is room for multitasking, and your brain might be better at work than you realize. During mindless activities like commuting, your mind is surprisingly free to do work. During your commute, you could brainstorm solutions to a problem, or try to come up with an intro for an essay you want to write, or practice your public speaking voice, or try to come up with a catchy marketing pitch. I know this sounds very late stage capitalist, like, you should always be working, there's no time for dilly-dallying, but hopefully you love what you're doing enough so that it doesn't really feel like work and is actually an exciting process rather than a laborious one. Back when I was a full-time student and worked part-time as a barista, I would do this all the time while cleaning or doing other mundane tasks at work. You might think this would be extra taxing and take more energy out of me, but I found it had the opposite effect. It made work go by way faster. And when I finally sat down to do work on my project later that day, I'd have everything I wanted to do already planned out in my mind. You might end up being surprised what your mind can accomplish when it's not being distracted by a screen. So, you should shoot for completion, not perfection, and start with small tasks that pose a real yet attainable challenge, and try to double up on tasks where you can. But what if when you finish your project, people think it just isn't very good? What if they think it's terrible? What if you think it's terrible? That is scary. And I'm not saying this is an easy fear to get over, but you need to realize one thing. This is not a what-if scenario. That just is the scenario. It's going to happen. Your first few works are going to be mediocre or worse. God knows mine were. And everyone who sees them will probably know it. But remember the potters from the parable. If they would have just quit within the first few or 10 or 30 that turned out poor, they never would have gone on to make that beautiful piece at the end. If they quit, they would have never gotten to see what they were capable of, and the world would be missing out on some damn good pottery. When I say know thyself, I'm not saying to just know your strengths and weaknesses. You'll learn that with experience, no problem. It's about knowing from the bottom of your heart why you love the craft. You need to know that even if you never succeed in the conventional sense, if you never earn a dime off of your efforts, that when you look back on your life, you will have been happy just to have done it. Whenever I realize that I'm letting the fear of others' judgment hold me back, I find myself repeating these words by Theodore Roosevelt. There are many who confine themselves to criticism of the way others do what they themselves dare not even attempt. It is not the critic who counts, or the man who points out how the strong person stumbles. The credit belongs to the person who is actually in the arena, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if they fail, at least fail while daring greatly. There is, of course, nothing wrong with a simple life. But if there is something that you love, that you really love, that you're not doing because your first attempts have gotten poor results, or because you think that you're not capable, or because time is a fickle companion that always seems to run away from you, or because other people may see you fail 100 times before you even succeed once, that's okay. But you may be missing out on a life-changing experience that's just around the corner if only you would get up and go look for it. Remember that this is just what I've learned in the last 2 years making video games. My perspective is very, very limited. So if these tactics don't work for you, look for something else. The fact that you watched an entire video on this topic means that you're probably on the right track of trying to improve, and you should be proud of that. I know how valuable time is, so thank you for giving me yours. Please share in the comments any tips you have for finishing projects, because I know I've still got a lot to learn. And maybe you'll help out other viewers too. If you are interested in the games I've made, I've published 2 puzzle games for PC and an action rhythm game for mobile. None of them are even close to being perfect, but they are finished, and for that I am proud of them. Thank you again for sharing your time with me. Have a beautiful rest of the day, wherever you are in the world, if you can. And if you can't, I hope this video could at least give you a little bit of encouragement to keep doing what you love when you can, because I know it can make a world of a difference for yourself and for others. Until next time, good luck and Godspeed.